www.clock-television@themasons.com, was born in the year 2271. In 2286, she met www.video/liquid@coopers.org, a lover boy who was just a year older than her.
The two of them were both Gaga kids that wanted something more than what GlobalSoft gave them to download. The more they talked, the more they discovered their hate for the fabricated music that GlobalSoft created only for profit. Gradually, they began to hate everything about the Gaga kids and this world, from the hairstyles to the clothes, and eventually even the names. The two young lovers began exploring places of Planet Mall that they had never heard of, and were quite obviously forbidden. They soon fell in love with one of these places, the Junkyard, where GlobalSoft disposed of all forbidden music, clothes, and anything that had to do with rock and roll. Here, the two found old records that they couldn't play. From these, they took new names that they only used with each other. www.clock-television@themasons.com became Big Macca, and www.video/liquid@coopers.org became Paul McCartney. After time, Big Macca and Paul McCartney began to try and make their own music by using scraps of things that they found in the junkyard. Of course, there were no real instruments. GlobalSoft had a special, more secure place for such dangerous objects. It was inevitable that they would be discovered, but they believed that they were invincible. They had something that no one else did: passion. Of course, passion is not a shield from evils, and GlobalSoft found them one night, making music, and something else too.
They were caught in the act. Immediately they ran. They had spent so much time in the junkyard that they knew it better than their own homes, so were able to escape the guards. But they knew they had to leave. Planet Mall was no longer safe for them. They ran from place to place for months, until Big Macca realized something. It was no longer just the two of them trying to escape. She was pregnant.
As happy as they were that they had made a child together, they were also terrified. They needed a place to live now. A hideout wouldn't do for a baby. Big Macca convinced Paul that they could trust her old friend, www.watch-race@powells.net. The two knocked on her door and she let them in, hid them in her basement and fed them. Not a week after their arrival, the police showed up at the door. Paul and Big Macca had already planned an escape route if something were to happen. What Big Macca didn't know was that Paul had a plan of his own.
His plan was to push Big Macca toward the exit, then fight the police until he knew she was far enough away, even if that meant he would die. His first priority was to protect his love and his unborn child. The plan worked perfectly. Big Macca was able to escape without so much as a scratch. She ran far enough away that she would not be seen, but she kept a close watch on the house, waiting for Paul to sneak away and join her.
He never did. Instead, she saw the police carry a body bag out of the house. Paul was gone, dead because of her. She had no idea how she could go on, but she forced herself to get up and walk far away from the city. She still had her child to think of. She could not lose both her love and her baby.
Is it raining in heaven? Do you want us to cry?
Over the next few months, she wandered, trying to find a place that she could sustain both herself and her soon-to-be-born child. As the baby grew larger, it was harder and harder to survive. She was stealing food from storehouses and even residences, until she finally came across an abandoned hotel. Using the last of her strength, she broke into one of the boarded-up windows and crawled in. She fell asleep almost immediately and woke to excruciating pain. Her contractions had started. Her cries of pain echoed through the halls of the hotel, and two strangers came running. They saw what was going on and immediately rushed to her aid. After 30 long hours, Big Macca finally had a baby boy in her arms. He looked exactly like his father.
Life goes on without you.
After some much-needed rest and food, the two strangers introduced themselves as Britney Spears and Meatloaf. When asked what her name was, Big Macca hesitated before answering. Paul. Sir Paul McCartney, she finally answered. She decided to name her son Paul Jr., but as he started to speak and developed a fondness for D's, they changed his name to P. Puff Diddy Daddy Dum Diddy Doo. By the time she was 16, Sir Paul McCartney had loved, lost, and had a child. She was wise beyond her years, and so became the leader of the self-proclaimed Bohemians. As the years went on, more and more Bohemians joined the four of them. They made contact with other groups across the global shopping precinct, and began to share the texts that they had found, which they assembled into their sort of Bible. Paul researched everything as much as she could. She wanted to know everything about the old kings and princes of rock and roll. The other Bohemians came to regard her as the elder in their group, and she saw all of them as her children. Whenever there was a sign of trouble, Paul was the first one to defend the hotel and protect everyone else. She was never going to be the one that ran away again, not after her love sacrificed himself for her life. Many years passed, and when Puff Diddy was 17 and Paul was 33, Brittany brought another two Bohemians to the Heartbreak Hotel. Paul was always cautious when new people were introduced, as she never knew who to trust after her so-called friend betrayed her and resulted in the death of her love. She was especially cautious with these two, as the boy appeared to have some knowledge of the texts, and there was no way he could have seen them unless he was a spy sent by GlobalSoft. After some convincing, she finally believed that Galileo was the dreamer, and told him everything that she knew, hoping that finally rock and roll would be reborn and they would no longer live under the shadow of GlobalSoft.
However, her feeling of hope was short-lived. No sooner had Galileo arrived and agreed to help, the commander Khashoggi of GlobalSoft found the Bohemians and captured them. Paul did not back down from him when he arrived, instead standing up to him, hoping that the other Bohemians, her children, would be able to escape with Galileo and Scaramouche. She fought hard and was defeated, but not before she saw Galileo and Scaramouche running away to safety.
When the Bohemians were grouped together at GlobalSoft, she couldn't see Brittany anywhere. He had died. Paul was shocked. Brittany had always been the one to see the good in everyone in every situation, and now he was gone. The man who had become a sort of brother to her had left the world for good. Paul's son, Puff Diddy, had been captured, and Paul saw him be tortured and placed into a laser cage, much like her own. It was the worst thing she could imagine, being locked in, unable to move, and seeing everyone she loved being brainwashed and tortured. When her time came to be brainwashed, she had no energy left to fight. Her family was destroyed. She no longer knew who these people were around her. The only thing she felt was a terrible sadness and loss. She didn't even know where she was. She just followed blindly as the Bohemians were led to the 7 seas of Rye. She does not know how long she was at the bar, but one day, Galileo and Scaramouche returned. Of course, she did not know who they were, but as the water drained even more from the lake, a statue became visible. Something inside her stirred. She recognized this, somehow. It was important. For the first time in a while, she was thinking again, trying to remember what exactly the statue was. Just as quickly as Galileo and Scaramouche had arrived, they left again, but this time taking the bartender with them. They left on a bike of sorts, and soon after, sounds of rock and roll could be heard. All her memories came swooping back in. Paul remembered who she was, where she came from, who her son was, and she realized with a flash, rock and roll was reborn. She and everyone else were finally free from GlobalSoft.